Good morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this to this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Mike Brooks and I'm Chairman for this committee. Councillor Alex Hall, Vice Chairman, is also present. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and with this in mind I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber to the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions are issued. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? And may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live, then press again when you finish your contribution. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Tom's going to deal with this one. Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Strengill today.
Thank you. Move on to the next item, declaration of members' interests. Do any members wish to declare any interest that they've not already declared on their declaration forms? No. Move on to item 3 then, the minutes of the reconvened meeting held on the 24th of October 2022. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 8 of the agenda pack. I'm going to just go through those page by page just for correct, and if anybody needs to raise a point on whether they're correct or not. Page 5, page 6, page 7, that is the meeting of the 24th of October, the reconvened meeting from the September meeting, that one. And then I've got the next is page 9, page 10, page 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and that's it. Do you all agree that this is a correct record of the previous those meetings? We will now vote on whether you agree that the minutes are now correct. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Are there any against? And are there any abstentions? Thank you. Presumably because not attended at the meeting. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 4 now. Item 5 now. Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. The first, I've got announcements. The first announcement is the visit by members by this committee to Links Lab. It was a very interesting visit, and I would like to thank Sam Edwards, Dan Goodman and the team up there for showing us around, and the presentation that we got. It really was a worthwhile visit. Unfortunately, we didn't get many of the committee there, so I would have liked to have seen a few more there, but you know, these visits, they do take a lot of organising and resources to taken up. So, you know, we really need to avail ourselves of those opportunities for training So if that could be borne in mind, please, in the future. But it was an interesting visit. We described the surveying and inspection regime for the highways to make sure that we're keeping an eye on the highways, surfaces, and targeting our resources in the right direction as far as maintenance is concerned and where we need to go and maintain stuff. And we had a visit round the lab as well to see how they analyse cores, the core of the roads and the materials that go into the road make sure they're the correct quality, etc. So it was an interesting visit, and those of us that attended found it really good. And moving on, we have a lighter agenda today with one pre-decision scrutiny report to take. May I ask officers presenting reports to summarise key points and what is asked about. Councillor Austin,
I was on the last item, Chairman. I was going to thank you for arranging it, because without you it wouldn't have happened. And I was appalled at the poor, what's the word I want, a number of attendees. I think some of us had come quite a long way, and I think if my husband hadn't been making up numbers, it would have looked even worse.
Yeah.
You know, we put a lot of officers to a lot of trouble, and you know, I, if you like, as chairman of this council, as distinct from anything to do with this committee, I think that we should do better when whether it's councillor development, well, this is in effect councillor development, wasn't it? When
Yeah.
these things are laid on for us.
Okay, yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
doing
I think I had made that point in and so I don't think really there's any need to go over that again. Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Dyer.
Chairman, with respect, you know, we're a council with mixed demographics. Some of us aren't retired and we haven't got unlimited time on our hands. So I think perhaps show a little more respect, Councillor Austin, to members who work full-time as well as serve on the council.
Can we finish that there?
Thank you,
now?
Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on then, are the Executive Councillor's announcements. Have we got any... I know Councillor Davies is on Teams. I don't know whether he's got no announcements. Right. Senior officers, are there any announcements from senior officers? No.
Unfortunately, Karen couldn't be here today, but there's no comment from the officers.
Thank you, Sam. Moving on then to the first item of real business on the agenda, item 6, which is the A16 Marsh Lane, Boston and Boston active travel schemes. This is a pre-decision scrutiny report. It's on pages 17 to 34 of the agenda pack and invites the committee to consider a report regarding the A16 Marsh Lane roundabout improvement scheme, Boston, and the active travel scheme Boston, which is due to be considered by the leader of the council. Executive Councillor for Resources, Communication and Commissioning, and the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT between the 14th of December 2022 and the 16th of December 2022. The views of the committee will be reported to them as part of their consideration of this item. The actions of the committee is invited to consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendations to the executive councillors as set out on pages 18 to 20 of the report and agree any additional comments to be passed on to the executive councillors in relation to this item. And Sam Edwards, Head of Highways, Infrastructure and Laboratory Services, will present the report. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman, and morning, everyone. So as always, I'll treat the paper as read and just pick out the pertinent elements of it. So we brought these two schemes along with the other four, so in total 6 to scrutiny about 5-6 months ago to give sort of an update on where we're at. And this is now bringing, as the paper suggests, the Boston Marsh Lane roundabout and the Boston active travel schemes to this committee for scrutiny prior to key decision. So as it says, this picks up 2 of those 6 schemes that were part of the levelling up funding. The reason we're bringing these together is because we're looking to procure these as one contract because of the locality and the efficiency that will be delivered through that. Quickly on the form of the scheme, looking at the roundabout improvement first. That is about widening the carriageway on the western side of the roundabout. Now that creates an extra lane, but the purpose of that is to create a designated right turn lane into the Marsh Lane Industrial Estate. Equally, we're widening as you exit the Marsh Lane Industrial Estate on the left-hand side to give a designated left turn lane back onto the A16. So just to make that really clear, although we're doing the construction works on the west side, it's to give the freedom to have better movements into and out of the industrial estate, which is what the bid was all about, which is about improving freight transport and the economy as a result of that. The second scheme is an active travel scheme, so that's a footway, cycleway improvement. There's a number of improvements that are on the plan as part of the paper. This is widening footways, including additional puffing crossings to encourage and improve the facilities that are already there to encourage those movements to the industrial estate from the neighbouring areas where people live. If this paper is approved through the key decision process, we would look to go out to tender from January to February. We're going through a competitive process through the LCC Select Framework. And if that concludes and there's a successful tenderer, we would then go into mobilisation before starting in April. It's expected this will take until August, although I would stress to this committee there is, until we have a contractor on board, we can't confirm those dates because the traffic management can change as you go through. You can find more optimised ways of doing it, and that can impact on the programme. But the estimate at the moment is about 5 months, maybe 6 months, depending on what scheme costs and programme come through. Questions that I'll go into quickly that I know I'll get is about traffic management, and I will start off by saying we're doing works on the A16. It's going to cause disruption. We're not going to shy away from that. It will cause disruption. Please don't think as officers we're saying it won't. So the majority will be done on 3-way lights, so the roundabout will be done on 3-way lights during the day and nights, and then intermittently there'll be nighttime closures to do the full surfacing. We do have some challenges around on Wibberton Low Road as far as nighttime closure for HGV access, and we're in discussions with those businesses about alternative arrangements that we can put in place. We'll continue those discussions once we've got a contractor on board, so we can go through the details of those kind of things. And really, just to finish off, that we are in discussion with the local business, the local community, Freight Association, and we've been out to talk about these types of schemes and the fact they're coming in the form of them. And as we get nearer to the start date, we'll go through the normal statutory process of informing 2 weeks in advance notice boards, normal permitting process as well. So at that point, I'll pause and request any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Have I got any comments or questions? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. You're going to hear from me in this one and the next bit, and after that I will shut up for the rest of the meeting. Right. This is one of the two that affect my patch, and solely my patch, really. I've no problem at all with this. It has been drawn to my attention, and I had to mention it to you a few minutes ago, Sam, that since the trees have been thinned and a lot some removed, there is certainly one resident on Bayswood Avenue who backs onto what was quite dense trees, who is now suffering very severe traffic noise from the A16. And I said I would ask on her behalf whether an acoustic fence would be a possibility. There may be a couple more houses in that situation. At this time, I don't know, because she only contacted me at the weekend. Right. I think this is very good. I'm happy with it. Unfortunately, the public who don't live in that area, the public who live down, say, in Wibberton, or even further south, don't realise that it's not meant to do anything to relieve the traffic chaos or the traffic queuing at Lincolnshire Street. And, you know, I know it isn't, but it might have been, you know, they don't read, people don't read all the details, do they? But, you know, the fact that it perhaps should be advertised more publicly as being solely to improve access to Marsh Lane. Other than that, I'm very happy. Obviously, ideally, sometime in the future, probably not in my lifetime, we shall need an exit, an entrance, the other end, the opposite end of Marsh Lane, instead of just this one. But anyway, this is good, so thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Austin. Do you want to come back, please, Sam?
Yeah, sure, thank you. First one about the trees. It's certainly something that we can take away and look at. What I would advise, and to advise to all the committee here, is as far as acoustic barriers, trees offer very little acoustic barriers to that unless you've got between sort of a minimum of 200 or 300 metres of thick trees. It doesn't actually offer any acoustic abeyance of the noise and things like that. So yes, there is some localised vegetation trimming as far as to do the scheme, but it's not going to make the noise any better or worse than it is currently. As far as having that discussion with the property owner about acoustic fencing, is not a requirement of the scheme, but absolutely, at the end of the day, we're here to serve the public, and we're more than happy to have a conversation with that person to talk through what could or couldn't be done within the parameters of this scheme, which I have to stress is quite close parameters because of the funding regime that went through from the DFT. The second point about Liquor Pond Street roundabout, you're absolutely right, and I think we've been very clear on the website, on the bid, and when I came to Scrutiny previously, and as I have now in all the papers, that this is about improving the flows of the HGVs from the south of the county along the A16 and into Boston, Marsh Lane Industrial Estate. It's not about alleviating traffic in Liquor Pond Street. Now, that's not me saying there isn't issues there, but that's not what this particular bid in this scheme is about. I'll be honest, I don't know how more clearly we can put that out in it, but I'd welcome any sort of comments outside of this committee that we can improve our communications through that process.
Thank you, Sam. Have we any other? Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I do use this area quite frequently for work, and I think this will be a big improvement on the area where it is. It's a very busy area that is often congested, and as we've alluded to, it won't necessarily reduce congestion, but actually it will manage the traffic better. One of the things I was particularly keen to see, and I know that you've referred to this on page 26, but the local businesses have got to be on board with this. It is going to cause some disruption. There are going to be nighttime closures. I'm not sure how you can sort of get around that, but you are absolutely imperative that we work with them in advance. I noticed that you've obviously just mentioned that the statutory notice is 2 weeks. Can we give them more notice? Because that doesn't feel a great deal when sort of looking at deliveries coming in overnight, particularly sort of considering they are large sort of HGV movements. The other points regarding the footways, are we dealing with that under this section or the next bit? Either.
So
yeah.
I think those are both done together, weren't they? The report has been given by Sam, so if you've got anything to say on
that's super. I think that the sort of pedestrian and cycling recommendations on page 21, particularly the Toucan crossings, are important. I know that we've heard from Councillor Austin previously about the number of workers that do work around that area and are walking around in the night, so I'm particularly glad to see that they will be lit crossings, and suspect that a big number of people will benefit from those, so thank you. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Any comments on that, Sam?
Yeah, sure. The first bit about keeping business involved, absolutely paramount. And I think, as we've done with a lot of these high-risk schemes, the first thing to do is to do exactly what I've done and what we'll continue to do, which is this is going to cause disruption. We're not going to shy away from that. It will. Now, where we can try and mitigate and limit that as much as we can, we will do. Informing business, we're already in dialogue with a number of businesses, including what we will have with our contractor on the board as a public liaison officer, as we've done with many other schemes, to keep that continual engagement with them. We're also in close discussion with the district council, because obviously they have sometimes a lot better connections or closer connections to the businesses. And in fact, this afternoon we're at the Boston Transport Board, where we'll be discussing this scheme and a number of others to try and get those out to the businesses. Because there's no secrets, there's no hidden agendas here. We want people to know. We want people to know what we're doing. And if they've got some suggestions, brilliant. As far as the 2 week, that's my That's not an issue. That's just one of the statutory things we do. It's a minimum 2 weeks notice board, but that's along with a suite of other statutory process. So they'll have, well, they're being engaged with now about what's going out, and there'll be a lot more than just the 2 weeks. So please don't be concerned about that. That's the only thing we do, because that's one of the last things we do. There's a whole rigmarole of process we go through before that.
Yes,
Just to come back,
Councillor Vernon.
obviously sort of one of the things that does, and particularly in this circumstance, is to ensure that sort of the nighttime closures that you're proposing at various times don't impact at other areas where there is works going on, where a diversion route may be affected, which can be quite an issue. And I think particularly for the level of traffic that goes into those sites in the evenings, that will be absolutely key to make sure that sort of looking at the wider route, not just sort of area A, if there's sort of roadworks going on there that are linked to where they would be coming from, I think we need to look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, I was just going to come back at it.
Yes,
Okay,
certainly,
Chairman.
Sam.
Just on the, so as part of the road space booking and permitting, that's exactly what we do through those teams, is look at what other works are taking place. There's a good, I forget what it's called now, but what used to be roadworks.org, I think it's one network now, is also a good area for the public to see and anyone else to see what is planned in the area. But we're absolutely in discussion with street works and permitting about not just other highways, but utility works, development works, things like that, so we can coordinate these things as best you can.
Thank you, Sam. Right, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is one of those cases where we're not going to get to the omelette unless we've broken some eggs. However, I completely endorse the point raised by Councillor Vernon, not least because my understanding is this is the only HGV route in and out of this particular industrial estate. But looking at the scheme as a whole, I'm really pleased that we've managed to incorporate the active travel component of this within the footpath space rather than the highway space, because whilst it's absolutely right that we make room for cyclists as well as pedestrians, the footpaths in this area are substantially less used than the highway, and I wouldn't want to see anything being pinched up on the road side of it to facilitate cycling, but that we've been able to do that in the footpath space is really good to see here. This represents a significant investment in one of the pinch points in Boston. One of the things that local businesses constantly raise is the access in and out of that industrial estate, and until such time as a new and alternative route into that industrial estate can be arrived at, this represents the very best thing that can be achieved, and I'm really, really pleased to see this money coming into this scheme and that the scheme is going to go ahead, effectively being able to take that industrial estate traffic out of and separate it a little bit from the people that are simply trying to get onwards and through town is a good thing. So I'm very happy, Mr. Chairman, to move the recommendations if that hasn't already been done, and look forward to seeing this come forward very soon.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Austin, come back to you.
Right, I did only talk about the one scheme. I thought we were going to be doing them separately, so I'm sorry. Yes, and as I said, the first one is, that's brilliant, you know, the amount of lorries, the amount of HGVs, and some of them are international, they're not just from within this country. You know, they just pour into the estate and out again. Now for the active travel. What is there is fine. But there's, first of all, there are some assumptions which I think have, it is assumed that the people who are walking will be walking along London Road. Now, if you've been around there at shift change, and I must admit there's shift changes at all sorts of ungodly hours, 2 a.m, 4 a.m, 6 a.m, I don't see those, but I know about shift changes in my sort of hours, and there are a huge number of people who walk out from the industrial estate on their way home, and the bulk of them are walking not along the Marsh Lane bit past the Spirit of Endeavour, but they go the old bit of Wibberton Low Road through the bollards. I've already mentioned those bollards to Sam because motorbikes can get through them. They were there to stop HGVs, but motorbikes now go through them. But, and they're not classed as active travel. But then everybody walks up to the top, to what we call Newton's Corner. The bulk of those people, and it applies to the school children as well with their parents, they don't live along London Road. They live along Wibberton West Road, and they cross by Black Sluice, London Road, the pedestrian crossing. They walk along the foot path that leads from there to the A16. They cross the A16 at the light control crossing, and then they carry on walking down Wibberton West Road. So those are, in other words, what you're missing possibly is making the walking along that narrow section of Wibberton Low Road better, please. It is dark, and with night light, you know, lights being off at night, it is a long, straight stretch with no lighting. But, you know, it'll be hard to change people's habits, I think, if they've always walked that way. If you can encourage more people then to walk past the Spirit of Endeavour that way, then that's good. Other than that, there's some drainage issues, but, you know, they'll get picked up. The overall scheme, again, is good. And if we can get more people, and this is the other bit of the map, I think, the active travel, isn't it? It's not only getting people to and from Marsh Lane, it's getting them to and from the school. And far too many children are dropped off by parents outside the school. Very busy school, very congested road. It's the rat run to the industrial estate. It's on a slight bend. Well, it was one of the schools that caused the pilot survey about the CCTV little cars, but it didn't do any good, unfortunately. So we've got to do something, and if you can improve, you know, getting more children walking with their parents to school, then that's what we need. They already do have the facility to park at the Spirit of Endeavour, and, you know, I think somehow we've got, you know, whether it's us collectively, me, I'm the local borough councillor as well as the county councillor. I don't sort of share this with anyone else at all. I'm the sole operator for the borough council on that. But they can park at the Spirit of Endeavour. We need to work with the school, I think, and, you know, I must, as well as, you know, us collectively, to get people, you know, parents prepared to just give a little bit more time in the morning. I know, a lot of us know when we've taken grandchildren to school, you're always running to catch up in the morning, but just to allow that bit more time so that you can safely get your child to school. So there's a lot of things that feed into that, but the actual scheme is good.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Would you like to come back on that, Sam, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Austin. So to start with, you're absolutely right. That is currently from our travel pattern surveys, that is where people travel. It's difficult to sort of verbalise here, but at the moment, from the crossroads between Marsh Lane and Wibberton Low Road, a lot of people come from the industrial estate, go north through the bollards, around the top, London Road, cross over, and then go their way to the west. But that is exactly what the scheme's about. So if we wanted to continue to encourage that route, unfortunately, that section of road north of the crossroads, once you get past the bollards, they're not quite terrace housings, but they're similar to that, and the footpaths are very, very narrow. The only way to encourage and to widen footways is to demolish properties, and I don't think that is something that we're looking at as bid or required. So instead, we looked at exactly what the scheme is to improve the flow, to encourage people, not to necessarily to discourage elsewhere, but to encourage people to continue along Marsh Lane. So so they'll continue along Marsh Lane to the roundabout that we're doing separately as part of the works. And the actual travel, as you can see from the plans, then improves the crossing, well, the section between the two roundabouts, between the Marsh Lane roundabout and I forget what the other one, I think it's the ATS roundabout further up. And there's a new puffing crossing going in there to encourage that. So instead of trying to where people go now and encourage it and improve it, where the ability that is very, very limited because of property demolition, is to improve further to divert them up. And that's what the facilities that we're putting in is to encourage to do that. On the point of the bollards, there are bollards there at the moment. We are looking to do some works around there, but there is a real challenge, and I'm not going to shy away from this. You know, there's been comments about motorcycles going between the bollards, but it's also a cycleway. So we're looking at what kind of infrastructure that we can put in, but it's very challenging when you want to encourage cyclists to go through, but you don't want to encourage misuse of motorbikes that aren't prohibited to go through that. We're looking at certain things at the moment, some physical things that we put in place, but it is going to be a challenge, and it's difficult, but I'm hoping that by putting the facilities in that we're planning to on Marsh Lane, that encouraging the cycling network to go down that route as a much safer alternative. But yeah, it is difficult to say this will ultimately remove that problem.
Chairman, it is in fact cycle route, national cycle route number 1. Goes past my house a bit further down. Thank you.
Thank you. As far as the use of the routes that we're trying to encourage people to use, presumably that is something that should be taken up with the school, their travel plan when this work is completed, to start encourage them to take that route, I would have thought. Yeah. Okay. Have we got any other questions or comments on this? No, it doesn't. Right. I'll move on to the vote then. We've had it moved by Councillor Ashton, so I will second that. But what we're looking at is moving the recommendations, supporting the recommendations in the report, and also the comments that were made. And there was the comment made about acoustic fencing or screening, which was Sam said he would have a look at that and see what we can do. And then the other comments have been collected and we'll pass those on. So would all those in favour of the recommendations in the report please indicate? Yep, thank you. Were there any against? I don't think so. I think it was unanimous. Did we have any abstentions? No, so that was unanimous. So that is supporting. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda there. Then the Highways Performance Report, Quarter 2, the 1st of July to the 30th of September 2022. And this scrutiny report is on pages 35 to 98 of the agenda pack, and this paper sets out the performance of the highway service for the period between July and September of this year. And the actions required from the committee is the committee is invited to consider and comment on the detail of performance contained in the report and recommend any changes or actions to the executive member for highways, transport and IT. Jonathan Evans is going to be presenting this report, and I'll pass over to Jonathan now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So this report is an update on all aspects of the highway service delivery, including the major schemes, quarterly performance data for the key contracts, highway works, traffic signals and the professional services contract, and strategic highlights relevant to the highway service in Lincolnshire. So I'll start with the major highway schemes update. The authority currently has 3 major highway schemes that are in progress. That's Grantham Southern Relief Road. So phase 1 and phase 2 is nearing completion. That's due to be complete or nearly complete prior to Christmas. Phase 3 started in April 2021 with planned completion at summer 2025. There's been some publicised in press articles, some difficulties and challenges that we're seeing there with the Eastern Embankment, and those issues have pushed back the scheme to that summer date now, and the completion or delay by about 18 months, which is approximately 15 million. There's further details outlined within the report that discuss the reasoning and the rationale behind that. Next major scheme is Spalding Western Relief Road. The works commenced in January 2022 and are programmed to be complete by the end of 2023. The final major scheme is North Highcombe Relief Road. Balfour Beatty have been appointed as the design and build contractor. There's been 3 public engagement sessions in the last quarter. They were held in September 2022 and they were generally well received by the public, and works are due to commence on site in late 2025. So if I move on to the other major highway schemes update, November 2022, in Appendix A, there's some further details on the Lincolnshire Coastal Highway, Levelling Up Fund projects, as discussed and outlined by Sam Edwards earlier, the A17 Heckington Dual Carriageway, and Red Lion Square, which is now complete. So if we move on to item 2.2, the performance report, a copy of the performance report is included in Appendix B, and this period covers July to September 2022. The results per each of the contract area are as follows. The Highway Works Term Contract Performance Indicator, these are the works delivered by Balfour Beatty, scored 71%. I note that the report listed as 73, but that is an error. It should be 71. That's a slight decrease from the last quarter of 73%. The Professional Services Contract Performance Indicators, WSP, scored 74.6%. That's a slight decrease from 75.4, but only marginal. The Traffic Signals Term Contract Performance Indicator, who's delivered by COLAS, scored a provisional score of 90%, and that's up 2 percentage points from last quarter. And then we've got the Client's Performance Indicators, so these are the ones that are scoring all the officers that are in-house doing the maintenance design schemes. That scored 83%, and that's a very small drop from 85% last quarter. The overarching key performance indicators, which sort of outline the highway service aspirations longer term, scored 68%, and that's a 1% drop from 69% last quarter. The success for Q2 performance data was holding the dramatic improvements that were achieved in Q4 and Q1 of year 3. And that was a big step that we made. So just consolidating the performance was seen success from officers. The other aspect to highlight was that the Highway Works Performance Indicator 3 scored for the first time following a significant package of works during the summer months. And that work relate to tasks completed against timescales, and that's the reactive works, stuff like our potholes, curbing, sign replacements. For specific areas of the service that are below the targeted performance, the following improvement plans are in place. So even though Performance Indicator 3 has improved in its scoring now, it still falls below the minimum bid position, which was tendered at 8 out of 10. It's currently scoring 4 out of 10, so that's why it's still got an improvement plan. The other aspect is low performance for PI8, and that's to do with the street lighting service standard. And that's a shift from the issues that we were facing in Q1 and Q4 last year. And it's a shift from the routine maintenance in Q4 is now sort of the new aspect is some of the delayed of response times to fault maintenance, and that's something that we're working on. The low service damages have a financial penalty of approximately 40,000 per annum, per quarter, sorry. So it's something that's actively addressed by all parties, client and the contractor side, so it's something that we're working on. In terms of the delivery of the 3 key highway delivery contracts, Professional Services, WSP, Balfour Beatty's Highway Works and COLAS Traffic Signals, they're all now in Q3 of year 3 of the contract. The link contracts are due for renewal on the 31st of March 2026, with the possibility of extensions up to the 31st of March 2032. So if I move now to item 2.4, which is the Highway Works Balfour Beatty contract. For Q2, it was another extremely busy period where a lot of work had been completed on the network. The data outlined, some of that is included within 2.4. I think something to highlight is probably the volume of works that was completed in relation to pothole maintenance. 17,000 faults completed during that period with 8,500 potholes. If I move on to some of the challenges and improvements that we're facing within the Highway Works contract, inflation within the construction sector continues to cause significant challenges for the highway service. However, the rate of inflation increase is showing signs of plateauing now, so that's a positive step. So since April 2022, monthly inflation has continued to rise at a rate of 3% per month. However, between July and August, the average increase rate has dropped to approximately 1%, with some of the elements of the service starting to decrease. The combined capital and revenue budget for the Highway Maintenance Service of 2022-2023 is approximately 82 million. The inflationary pressure since the start of the contract, which was the 1st of April 2020, has reduced the buying power of the service by approximately 19.3 million. As discussed at the October Highways and Transportation Scrutiny Committee, LCC have now implemented a mid-year rate review from August 2022 that is targeting uplifts at small and medium-sized enterprises working within Lincolnshire. I confirm that that's now complete. As seen by the improvements in Performance Indicator 3, the reactive service, since March 2022, the number of live jobs within the system has continually reduced from highs of 8,200 to the current level of approximately 1,800. And that's a really good place to be prior to coming into the winter season with the colder weather and sort of the volatility and the issues that creates on the network. So if I move now on to item section 2.5, Professional Services Contract, WSP, I just wanted to focus on one of the performance indicators, which is PI1, and that's compliance with tendered quality statements. So WSP are on target to deliver 9 out of 10 of the selected Year 3 quality statements, which are measured annually. So WSP are also encouraged to develop continuous improvement and innovation initiatives, which are on target and sort of making cost savings year on year. Included in innovative approaches to problem solving on highway schemes, provision of free training for local highway colleagues, and the use of some new products, vegetated wall systems for flood alleviation schemes. The other aspect to highlight is the internal TSP client satisfaction scores obtained through the client satisfaction questionnaires for those schemes completed within the quarter have improved in Q2, with most clients being satisfied with the service. Whilst the average response score looks reasonable at 7.5 out of 10, there was one project which was below the minimum standard, and that's having its own sort of package of work and looking to see the cause of that failure. Within the measures, WSP are targeted to fill requested vacancies within 3 months. The score for Q2 equates to 6 out of 10, which is down 2 marks from Q1. And that's the main challenge that we're facing on the professional services contract. That's the recruitment of specialist engineers within the sector at the moment is a challenge for all authorities, and the same for Lincolnshire County Council. If I move now on to item 2.6, the traffic signals term service contract, COLAS. Q2 scoring for COLAS remained consistently good, with an overall PI score of 90 out of 100, up from 88% last quarter, and that's driven by improvements in responses to emergency faults. The changes made to the performance indicators for 22-23 have driven the right behaviour and made some great improvements to the task order process. Performance indicators 2 and 10 are now under review, with alternatives being considered for other areas that are perceived to be in need of improvement. And that's something that we try and do throughout our performance setting cycle, looking for new performance indicators and challenging ourselves as a service. The annual inspection and maintenance of the Lincoln tidal flow was conducted in August 2022. The opportunity was taken to conduct remedial works at Cannock Road and South Park Junction at the same time, as well as allowing utility companies access to take advantage of the road closure during this busy part of the network. And that links to our key performance indicators, co-location with other providers to minimise disruption to the public. So that's something that we're trying to incentivise all the time to make sure when we are having to impact the public, we're collaborating with our partners to get as much work as done as we can. So if we move now on to the final section, complaints. A copy of the Highways Complaints Q2 report can be found in Appendix C. Out of 19,000 contacts, LCC received a total of 232 complaints to the customer relations team in the second quarter of this year, equating to somewhere in the region of 1% of all contacts. Out of these 232 contacts, 182 entered the formal complaints process. Out of the 182, 33 were partially or fully upheld. The main themes there were related to scheduled maintenance, and that was notice periods for some of our nighttime closures and movements of our programme, and potholes. The number of complaints entering the formal process increased by 1.6 within the quarter in comparison to previous years, which was 77%. And that's probably, we're trying to understand exactly what's happening there. I think it's probably, we've got a system that's allowing the member of the public to, we're more access in terms of complaints, which is a really positive thing. We're allowing the customers or the public to make contact with us easiest. And then I think the other is just the volume of work that was completed in the summer periods, our busiest time of the year when our networks are busy. So in conclusion, Lincolnshire Highways team and its strategic partners continue to deliver an efficient and effective service during an extremely challenging market conditions. The performance reported in Q2 demonstrates that the service held the large improvements that were made in Q1, and the committee is asked to consider the comment on the detail contained within the performance report and recommend any changes to the executive member for Highways, Transport and IT. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Jonathan. It is good to see the number of outstanding faults down to 8,000 from 8,200 to the current level of 1,800, and it just seems as though we're getting on top of those, and hopefully before our busy time through the winter. I've got Councillor Clark has indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan, the grant from Relief Road, £15 million extra due to the poor standard of the ground. Was this known before the project was started? If not, why? You know, is it common that this sort of thing comes to light once the project has started? Thank you.
Jonathan, you go.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clark. Today we're fortunate enough to have Sam Edwards in the room, who's the head of infrastructure for covers that project. So without trying to deflect the question, it's something that from a service manager perspective, so I manage the contract that WSP are the designer there. So we're both sort of working on this project jointly, but I think you probably get a more detailed response from Sam Edwards. Thank you.
Yeah, nice pass. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, it's, to sort of summarise the position is that the extent of the poor ground conditions wasn't understood at the point of design. Otherwise, we would have designed something different of what we're doing now to alleviate it. Just to be clear, what we are doing now is rather than stabilising the ground, we're extending the bridge by 70 metres so that the bridge lands in more stable ground. Should this have been understood before? Yes, that's a very simple answer. And all I can really say is it is very sensitive in how we're doing it, sort of commercially as well as legally, and there's an ongoing sort of investigation into how we've got to where we are and what the ramifications are going forward. What I will be clear is we are divorcing that away from the actual practical resolution of building the bridge and completing the scheme. We cannot take the focus away from that. So that is our absolute main focus, notwithstanding that there is a process to go through to understand what's happened, how we correct it, how it's remediated it, and to ensure it doesn't happen again. And one of those things that we've looked at, for example, as Jonathan discussed, the North Icon Relief Road, is a design and build contract. So instead of the authority being the controller to the designer and then the contractor, we appoint the contractor, they appoint the designer. So that's one of the things that we're putting in place to consider things in different ways when you're looking at a scale of construction of a scheme of this nature.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, Councillor Clark. Well, thank you. Councillor Dyer. Got over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few questions. First of all, in the introduction, there's information about the budget position of the highways as a whole. So the buying power of highways is, it's been impacted by the sum of £19.3 million. How will that impact the service that we provide on the ground on a day-to-day basis? And then I suppose as a follow-on from that, I just want to know what service areas will be cut to fund that shortfall. And then, again, related to that, does this council still fully commit to delivering the full North Icon Relief Road as a dual carriageway and commencing it in late 2025, as is outlined? And is that something that we can confirm today is still definitely the case and something that we're definitely working toward? Just a few more questions on the report, Chairman, if I may. Within the report, a breakdown of improvements made this quarter has been provided. For public rights of way, 0.75 miles of improvements to public rights of way. I think that's quite poor, actually, in the county of Lincolnshire, for the amount of public rights of way that we have. Could you just outline what improvements actually mean? So the detail, I wouldn't expect, or to be fair, it's only 4 schemes, so actually you could probably tell me what the 4 schemes were. And do we have any plans to see more public rights of way improvements, especially as we're trying to get people to, you know, get out of the car and walk? On page 53, one of the performance targets is minimising disruption to the public. And I know that target is just in respect to works going past their estimated completion date. But actually, as I've experienced, it's not just delayed work. Do we actually look at how the works are actually managed? I.e., are the contractors using the right diversion routes? Is the signage as good as it can be? There's been some works in my division, even going down the A15 to Fullbeck over the summer, where we could say, actually, we've really, really fallen short in respect to what we'd expect to minimise disruption to the public. So I don't think the performance measure here is good enough, to be honest, because delays, that's only part of the story, isn't it? If it's a disaster whilst the works are happening, then quite frankly, it doesn't matter if they're delayed. On page 53 as well, CO2 emissions. Do we measure emissions for the contractors to travel to site? So when I've spoken with contractors, a lot of them come from Doncaster. So do we keep a record of this when we're looking at the impact of the highways as a service? And finally, something I haven't seen mentioned in this report, the highways app, that seems to have died a death. And there's now a facility through the members' intranet for members to be updated on what works have happened within their division. So is the highways app a done deal? Is that dead now? And are we expecting members to use the intranet? Just because on that, I found those updates quite helpful, but would it be worthwhile to provide a briefing for members just so they know how to get onto the intranet and find those documents? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Jonathan.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. I'll try and recall them, but if I miss anything, please let me know. So the first one, I think, was related to the buying power of the service. That's the impact of inflation within the construction sector, which is above that experienced by members of the public in terms of the sort of normal retail consumer price index and retail price index increases. So from the 1st of April 2020, the impact of that inflation rises just means that our money doesn't go as far. During that time, the Lincolnshire County Council has raised our revenue and it's done the project Fix Our Funds to Fix Our Roads. So that's the 12.3 million that's come back into the service, and that was funding that wasn't reduced by the Department of Transport. Ultimately, what's happening in the background here is we've secured funding for the revenue aspects of the service. So there are day-to-day fault responses, our winter service, the critical Highways Act sort of response that we do is covered. The bit that the impact ultimately is linked to the paper that we brought in October. The strategy that we're aiming for as a service is to hold a steady state in our key asset groups and improve the condition of the unclassified network. For the short-term period, whilst these inflation pressures are with the Lincolnshire County Council, it just means that our spend on our capital schemes, what we can do, the length of the network, the impact reduces slightly. So we expect that to be a short-term aspect. So whilst our strategy is to improve the network, whilst these inflation pressures are there, it's something that will reduce exactly what we can do. So there's no point in sort of avoiding that question. I know in terms of as an officer, we're sort of raising through councillors some of the pressures that we're facing, and Lincolnshire County Council, I believe, have done everything and more in terms of securing funds and looking forward for next financial year. It's also raised these inflation pressures on the medium-term financial plan. So I think that's just an honest response to you there on those ones. So in terms of service cuts, there's none that we are anticipating for next financial year if some of the inflation pressures are met, as I believe they're going to be. So the other one, in confirmation for North Highcombe Relief Road, I'm just looking over to Sam, but yes, the full intention is to deliver that scheme, and we intend it to start in, I think it's the summer of 2025. In terms of public rights of way, again, it probably comes into that pressure of funding. We're trying to maintain our key asset groups in a steady state. One of those is the public rights of way. doing any more. We can accelerate improvement in that area. That's something, if funding was made available, we could do so. We try and maximise our funds whenever we, spend on the network by doing them in a coordinated way, bringing contractors and ensuring that we've got good rates on our contract. I can take that away though and provide a bit more information to Councillor Dyer before the next meeting and work with him there. If there's any schemes that we need to be doing more or funding more in that area, that's something that we can do. But we are currently trying to hold that in a steady state position. In terms of page 53, which was minimising disruption to the public, the main aspect that what we try and do on the network is co-location. So that's whenever we've got a project, whether that's a capital one or a maintenance one, we're always trying to minimise the disruption. I think Councillor Dyer, you referred to the poor signage or an error. That's for us as officers to supervise. So we supervise the works on site, and we'll address that through a defect process with the contractor. Or if they're not providing the service ultimately, we can either recharge that or a request that that's corrected there and then. If the signage isn't correct, that would be an emergency fault where we'd deploy one of our teams out to it and correct those signs. So that's not something that we'd like to hear, and if there's any examples of them, more than happy to work with Councillor Dyer to improve that situation. In terms of, I think it was page 53 as well, it was the CO2 emissions. Lincolnshire County Council have actually signed up to be one of 7 pioneer authorities working with the Future Highway Research Group. It's funding that have come down from ADEPT and the Department of Transport to look at capturing the amount of CO2 that our service provides. We've got sessions lined up in the second week of January to baseline the service. So that's looking at scope 1, 2 and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And the comment that Councillor Dyer made about travelling time from the start of a journey from the operative's house to a depot, that will be captured as part of that process. I think we've got a key performance indicator at the moment that goes some way to doing that, but that in-depth look at scope 1, 2 and 3, and it'll be the scope 3 emissions that will be the real focus there, which it's about virgin aggregates, quarrying, those sort of bigger carbon producers that we do, our batching plants, how we bring them into the service. So that's a really exciting piece of work that's underway. I think it will be sort of industry leading, and it's a really good thing for Lincolnshire County Council to be doing. And finally, hopefully, it's the councillor app. There was an announcement last week, I think went out to all councillors. Lincolnshire County Council with Balfour Beatties have now sort of put an interim app in position, or a SharePoint site. That's providing access to sort of key communications that are coming from the highway service, and it also shows the before and after photos of all faults that are completed within the councillor's ward. And that's really good, just good to have more eyes, if we're honest, of defects on the network. We now require photos before and after, so that interim solution has been put in place. Balfour Beatty are still working on a final app. That's linked to a number of other bids that they've got around the country, Buckinghamshire and East Sussex. So that's something that they are still working on. But our interim solution is the SharePoint site that is now made available. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do you need to come back on any of that? Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of comments that I'd like to make, if that's okay. So the first aspect is on page 4 under PSP P19, talking about the loss of impact through the impact with the loss of key staff. I think we need to be clear that sort of having 3 schemes that had a minor impact, 2 that had moderate, and 1 that had a significant impact through loss of key staff, I think it's sort of probably necessary for us to take steps to ensure that that isn't the case, and that there's continuity of service sort of if staff do leave. The other point that I'd like to make is on page 38. I'm really pleased to see that Lincolnshire County Council have carried out a rate review for small and medium enterprise, because I think those are the companies that are going to be hit highest by the rising costs. So it's important to support them, and I'm really pleased to see that we've done that. The final thing that I'd just like to mention is relating to Alliance KPI 7 on page 89, which is the positive press coverage. I think sort of 252 stories, 78 positive, 126 neutral and 48 negatives. let's get the good news out there. There's an awful tendency to focus on negativity, and I think sort of let's push the good projects that are taking place, the good things that are happening, and actually sort of, obviously 126 neutral, 78 positive. I'm sure that there are a lot more positive things taking place, so I think we need to talk about them more. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Jonathan, do you want to come back there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Vernon. In terms of the loss of key staff, that it's a concern for the professional services provider. We're finding technical roles to deliver some of the specialist structural engineers or drainage engineers. The market is busy at the moment with stuff like high speed rail 2 and national infrastructure projects, and coming out of a sort of a pandemic period, we're finding them hardest to recruit. So that's something that the highways team are working on, and we've got a number of improvement plans underway there, whether that's sort of trying to retain them through other mechanisms, flexi time, it's the sort of the softer side of the things that we can do as a local authority. Final one was the positive press coverage. We do try and actively push that whenever we can. I think we'd be nice to work with councillors about how we proactively get that message out. We try and put out a comms calendar of sort of the reoccurring themes for advice for winter, advice for street lighting at those sort of times, and grass cutting. Just really put that positive message out there, because we are doing some really good work. And when you look at the volume of work that's being delivered through the contract, we issue somewhere in the region of 40,000 task orders through the Balfour-Beatty contract. 99% of those are really successful. So yeah, it'd be really nice to work with potentially the Lincolnshire County Council comms team and the councillors on something more proactive there.
Yes, Councillor Vernon, come back.
Just going back to the first section with the loss of the key staff, it's not. I understand that sort of recruitment is difficult at the moment. I understand that staff retention is also difficult, and I think sort of really those in the team need to know what's going on, so that the impact on these staff leaving isn't quite so key. And I recognise it's impossible to tell which member of staff is going to leave, who has a key sort of role on a particular project, but there needs to be a number two who can step in, even if it's just on a short-term basis, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Jonathan, I've just followed up on what Councillor Vernon said about a lot of positive work. I mean, a lot of the works that take place in the highway are actually really well done. Well, everybody says about the complaints, which is fair enough. But most of my complaints in my division in the last few weeks and months are actually to do with companies working in the highway, utilities, really poor traffic management from them, completely ignoring their temporary traffic systems they put in place, like blocking the temporary lights with their own lorries so you can't get up, and even one in a village where they've put temporary lights in a very restricted parking area for residents, so you've driven past the lights because they're obscured by a van before you've even seen them. So forgive me if I've missed it, but in the performance management, does it reflect anywhere the complaints that come in that are not to do with actually the highways team's work here, but actually to show just how much poor highway management is being conducted by private companies?
Thank you, Councillor Wright. In terms of the complaints that come into the service, the ones that are logged there are ones that apply to the highway service. I believe quite often we'll get complaints from members of the public about a vehicle that has something like a highway maintenance on the back of it, and we find that they aren't working for the Lincolnshire County Council in any way. We do pursue all of them to make sure the majority of our fleet is tracked, so we can quickly rule them out. But those that are deemed to be not an LCC issue are taken out of the statistics. Something that we can do, though, is through our streetworks and permitting team, is enforce contractors that are working on our permitted road space through inspections, ultimately, on the signage, the traffic management. That's something that we're actively doing. For vehicles and usage of contractor equipment that isn't permitted, that's probably more challenging for us, and that's something that sometimes in that grey area of where it fits, but we don't believe that they're covered within the complaints. However, some may get through.
Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. If I can just come back, I think it would be really useful if those complaints could be listed. So, because quite often the public just think whoever's working in the roads, it must be highways. And the point you made about vehicles, I think they should be licensed. The ones that say highway management. I mean, there's been an absolute explosion of them. The number I've seen, and they've got nothing to do really. I mean, and some of those, they cause havoc because people give way to them, they create traffic management problems in themselves, and it just seems ridiculous that anybody can stick that sticker on the back of the van and get away with it, because it does give a false impression. But I do think it'd be useful if somewhere so people can see, because as I say, they make a wrong assumption. A number of times, I won't name the companies that are currently in my area, but the number of complaints I've had about them, I said, look, it's not a highways. We need to be going to them, and so, you know, we're trying to resolve it.
Yes, Jonathan.
I was just going to offer to take an action on that, to take it back to the customer relations team, and we'll try and collate that data wherever we can.
Thank you. I'd also just mention, which is pertinent to the point you brought up, Councillor Wright, is that we have got a report coming to this committee on street works and permitting, and that's supposed to be coming in April, I think. I know there was a particular attention being given to Anglian Water on that, but there are lots of other undertakers as well that are doing works in the highway, and I think you know, we need a report that covers them all, and discuss what sort of action can be taken to address those problems that these people are causing. But certainly with blocking roads up unnecessarily when they're not working and all of that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that this committee can pick a lot of that up when that item comes. Okay? Yep.
We can, Chairman, for once, I'm not having a go at Anglian Water. I'd rather have a go at them about their disgraceful sewage discharge rates than the road management. But no, it's the other companies that I'm referring to in my area at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important that we cover it all rather than just sort of focusing in on one particular undertaker. Okay. Have we got anyone else wants to ask a question, to speak? No. Right, thank you for those contributions. We've just got an item to be taken away on the public rights of way, more info, the disruption to the public and street working. I've already just mentioned that, and the point that there would be no or not intended to have any service cuts due to the reduction, not in reduction in funding, but due to the effects of inflation on how much the money that we've got can buy. So it's trying really to hold the line on all of that, isn't it? So thank you for all of that. I'm going to go on to the proposal now, and I move that the committee receives the verbal update on performance for the transport service, and also that our comments are taken under consideration by the relevant officers and the executive portfolio holder. Does anyone dissent? No? So that's agreed then, and that will go forward. Thank you. On to item 9 now, which is the Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Mablethorpe Transport Strategies 2000. Oh no, I'm hopping. Yeah, I'm hopping on. I've got the transport Q2 performance. Prior to that, I'm trying to get on towards the end of the meeting. Now, agenda item 8. I've been writing on the wrong page, unfortunately, when I've been making notes. The Transport Q2 Performance Report, verbal update. And this is a verbal update on the performance of the transport service for Q2. And the actions of the committee is invited to receive the verbal update and comment on the performance of the transport service and recommend any changes or actions to the executive member for highways, transport and IT. Verity Druce is going to take this item, and she's on Teams. So what I'll do is hand over to Verity now.
Thank you, Councillor. And I apologise to everybody, I'm not there in person. I've had several meetings to attend this morning, so I do apologise. So in terms of the main points I wanted to cover, at the last meeting you may recall that we presented a first update really around everything that is going on in transport services, including how we intend to report to you in the future in terms of our quarterly performance. We explained that there'll be a dashboard in place as a mechanism which we're developing using Power BI as part of the Council's corporate approach. with a reporting suite of measures and data sets that we will report on directly to you as well as officers within the council. From an educational travel perspective, this is a fundamental part of our transformation programme. And as part of the budget forecasting and projection work we've been undertaking on the educational travel budgets this year, in the last month or so, we've had to undertake a lot of data cleansing activity because that's identified some issues with our data accuracy in our database. So that's meant that I couldn't present to you our dashboard because we wanted to re-baseline those figures to make sure they were accurate. So that's something we're undertaking, and that will be done by the end of December. So with a view to then the next report which comes through to you on educational travel will include that full dashboard of measures that we've previously shown to you in the last paper. I have got some indicative figures which I'm just going to run through now so you can just get a flavour for some of the things that are happening in educational travel. So in terms of some of the figures, we're still seeing an increase in the total number of passengers that we're transporting. So in just the last month, we've had circa 100 extra passengers come through. And that's a significant uplift in terms of this time last year. Again, in parallel to that, we're seeing an increase in the number of contracts we're needing to put in place for travel provision, which we would expect. However, on some positive numbers, our single occupancy loan travel contracts have reduced from last year, which is where we wanted to be. And also we've put in place some new and more compared to last year personal travel budget arrangements with parent carers, which is again one of the things we've been working on. And we've reduced the use of passenger assistance, which is another high cost element to passenger travel provision compared to last year. So there's some of the headline indicators that we're seeing over the last few months. And moving forward, when we produce that dashboard for the next report, there's a lot more detail that will sit beneath the dashboard that we will be able to present to you. So some of those examples will be the client and passenger numbers broken down by the type of travel provision, which is always an important comparator for us. The cost per passenger in those different types of travel provision, and that will be able to give us that cost avoidance, transformation, efficiency projections that we're looking to be able to demonstrate to you. Number of contracts awarded, which will obviously align with number of passenger numbers. So again, we can start to look at things like vehicle usage and utilisation in terms of our resource in the market and how effective we are at maximising that resource. And we're also going to be able to present more detail around eligibility of our applications that are coming through and how many, for example, we've not granted eligibility to versus approving eligibility to, and also how many we're taking through to the stage 1 and stage 2 appeals process on the decision making. So that just gives you some of the indicators that we will be using in the new reporting approach. And that will be something that we develop over time. Things like emissions information around our vehicles will be something we want to develop into the future, but won't be able to do straight away. From a public transport perspective, we're still working on the measures. We presented some options to you in the last paper. And so we're now working on the feedback we had in the meeting and the feedback we've had since the meeting, and just trying to fine tune what measures we want to put in from a public transport perspective. And again, looking to do that by the time we come back to you for the next quarter's report. One of the complexities with public transport is that when it was deregulated a number of years ago, it also has within its a prescribed funding and regulatory framework. And we have to factor in a lot of elements such as state aid and competition rules. And the role of the local transport authority within the context of that can often be misunderstood. So we want to ensure that the measures we present to you are measures that are appropriate for a local transport authority, but also demonstrate where the market is at and where local bus network is at. So it's more complicated, I think, than the educational transport side. So that's what we'll be working on. In the last meeting, we talked about punctuality particularly around Core Connect, which is something that obviously we can manage and we can control from a local authority perspective as we run that service. So that's something we will want to focus on as an example, and we'll continue to work with the chairman on where we get to with public transport and then present at the next quarter for the whole service. And that concludes the main points I wanted to update the committee on, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Verity. Yeah, the point you make about the dashboard and other items coming forward so that we've got a paper report at the next meeting is important. I think the committee would like that rather than just the verbal report, but
yes,
we do understand the reasons for a verbal report today. Have we got any comments or questions, Verity? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. On Core Connect, if I'm not mistaken, a few meetings ago, it came up and we was told you was looking at longer hours. Has that actually been looked at yet? Thank you.
Over to you, Verity.
Yes, thank you. And Helen might want to add to me. I don't know if my camera's working. Hope you can all see me. So yes, we are undertaking a full review of the different options around Core Connect. So it's not just looking at whether we extend the hours, it's actually looking at the whole service and what benefits that's giving and versus the cost to the council and also the resource impact in terms of the market. So we are undertaking a full review of that, and that will be, I think it's due to finish in January, but Helen might be able to advise on the timeline for that. Helen's in the room at the moment.
Yeah, Helen.
Yes, about January. We can come back and confirm the absolute finish day. I mean, the other thing is about modernising the service and using the app all over the county. So, but I'm not aware specifically longer hours are included in the review, but we'll check and confirm that back to you. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Helen. Have we any other comments or questions on the verbal report? No? We haven't, so I'm going to move on then. Thank you, Verity, and thank you, Helen, for the verbal update. I'll now move that the committee receives the verbal update on the performance of the transport service, and also that our comments are taken under consideration by the relevant officers and the executive portfolio holder. Does anyone dissent? No. Thank you, that's agreed then. Now we will move on to the item 9 now. Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Mablethorpe Transport Strategies 2022. And this scrutiny report can be found on pages 99 to 302 of the agenda pack. The report and appendices provide a final update on the Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Mablethorpe Transport Strategies and include the final Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Mablethorpe Transport Strategies 2022 and summary documents. And the committee is invited to review and make comments on the contents of and endorse each of the 3 area transport strategies, namely Grantham Transport Strategy, Sleaford Transport Strategy and Skegness and Mablethorpe Strategy. And 2, that the committee also approves the plans contained within each transport strategy. I've got Carl Gibson and Steve Brooks with us today, the Senior Projects Leader, Leaders Highways Infrastructures, and they're going to present the report, and I'll hand over to them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So today I'm bringing 3 new transport strategies, so these following the footsteps of the Lincoln Transport Strategy and the Gainsborough Transport Strategy, and also the umbrella document that covers all these strategies, which covers the whole of Lincolnshire, which is the Local Transport Plan 5. So an overview of the strategies. So we've followed the same process for all the strategies we've done so far. So there's a number of stages that we follow. So this takes us from understanding the current and future challenges to generating options, a vision and objectives for each of the transport strategies, and then ultimately this leads to various schemes and measures and the final strategy. One of the key stages in the development of all the strategies is the engagement stage. So this is where we carried out a number of public engagement events around each of the towns, where we met the general public, and also there was various workshop meetings with local members and stakeholders and other interest groups. So these all helped in the understanding people's views of what they considered was actually working well now across their particular areas, but also what was challenging and what they thought might be needed over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, which is sort of the life of these individual transport strategies. As mentioned, the umbrella document that's covering all the transport strategies is the Local Transport Plan 5, which was adopted, I think, at the start of this year, if I remember rightly. So obviously there's key themes which are in that umbrella document, and it's important that we've actually embedded those key themes within each of the transport strategies. So, you know, some of the key themes, for instance, of economic growth or climate change, decarbonisation, things like that. So we've made sure that the synergy between sort of like the mother document and the children documents. As you'll see in the transport strategies, there's a number of different components that make up the strategy. So these start from the key pillars. So these are actually the backbone sort of schemes or interventions that will help us meet the vision and the objectives more strongly in each of the transport strategies. Linked to them are supported interventions. So if these are also carried out, these are only just strengthen those links with the vision and the objectives that are in the strategies. We've got strategic interventions. So these are more measures and interventions which will require close partnership working with train operators or Network Rail or national highways, for instance. We've also got connected strategies. So obviously the transport strategy is focusing primarily on transport, but transport impacts on so many other different areas and vice versa. So in the connected strategies, these can cover land use planning, so that can have a significant effect on what's in the local plan and where development actually goes and its connectivity to those local areas. We've also got the Green Master Plan, and we've actually also got the LCC Corporate Plan, so it's making sure that they all align with those documents as well. The final component, which is covered in the strategies, which we've called Monitor and Investigate. So these are things that over the course of the strategy, when the time is right, we will probably look further into these particular measures and take further action if necessary. So now I'm just going to hand you over to Steve. So Steve's just going to talk about, rather than focusing on each individual transport strategy and all the schemes that are within the transport strategies, I think Steve's just going to focus more on the sort of like the key pillars of different types of packages that are in each of the strategies, and just give you a bit more understanding of what they are and how important they are.
Thank you, Carl. Mr. Chairman, good morning, everybody. Next slide, please, Kiara. Thank you. The next 3 slides are just to give you a flavour of what's in the strategies. There's a lot of synergy that exists between them, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. A couple of market towns and a couple of coastal towns. And the strategised concepts that I'm going to talk about, rather than using the word detail, because detail doesn't exist for them. But ultimately what we have that's cascaded out is ideas such as targeted junction improvements, which we've highlighted in this plan. It's a number of locations. These locations throughout the consultation and engagement process, whether it's stakeholder, whether it's online, whether it's the public drop-ins and our traffic modelling, has identified locations where we may consider future interventions. It may be for capacity, it may be for safety, it might be for active travel, or any one of a number of other reasons. And these exist across the 3 study areas. Something else we've picked up on, sustainable urban extensions, colloquially referred to as SUs, in old money development sites. And now we're looking at more joined up type of thinking with these urban extensions. So better facilities for cycling, better facilities for walking, connection to bus networks and public transport. So it's more joined up, it's more integral with what we currently have. Next slide, please. Okay, this plan's Sleaford, but again, synergy across all the study areas. On here we've got cycling, walking network plans, and that's for improving cycling infrastructure along key corridors that have been identified to open up recreation, open up commuting in a safe and easily navigable location and format, with a view hopefully to encouraging people to get out of their cars and get onto push bikes a little bit more, or even on foot. And they exist across a number of locations around the county, not just the study areas. One we've identified here in Sleaford is mobility hubs, and that's bringing together various forms of transport. So railway stations and better bus services, better cycling facilities, better walking facilities, electric vehicle charging points, cycle hire, those sort of concepts, and these exist across the areas. Next slide, please, Cara. And then finally, the map shows the Mablethorpe and the Skegness and between areas. One that stands out separately here, possibly, is the facilitating visitor travel. Obviously, we have a lot of people come to the coast, not just Mablethorpe, not just Skegness, but the areas beyond and between. So we're looking at ways that we can improve that experience to get people to and around the areas within this transport strategy. And we're looking at integrated public transport networks, not dissimilar from the mobility hubs. There's a picture there, that's Skegness Station, and I believe that actually very recently a contract has been awarded for improvements to be made to that station. But further to that, we would like to see ways that we can try and join up that experience, so such that when people come to Skegness on the train, they're not just left on the train and got to find their own way around. So that's probably better taxis, better cycling facilities, better signage, linked up bus facilities, and maybe even the likes of bus priority, if we can find space and sufficient routes. We have spoken to one of the bus companies, and they particularly like the idea of it to help, obviously, with their patronage, but the greater good is it would sort of facilitate better movement of people around the study area. So those three slides are just to give you a flavour of the sort of things that we're looking at. We'll reiterate the detail isn't necessarily there yet. That will come as and when it would be made available and schemes come to fruition. Then we do the data acquisition, and the locations would develop into more full-blown schemes that we would look to deliver. And then one last slide, electrification, EVs, electric vehicles. Fairly high priority at the moment, fairly high profile. I believe we've been allocated a grant to trial on-street charging points in terraced streets and the like around not just study areas but around the county, and that's also included within all of the strategies going forwards. That's the end of our presentation, Mr. Chairman, so invite any questions.
Thank you, Carl and Steve. Right, I think if anybody's got any questions about the overall approach to the strategies, I think we take those first, and then if people have got individual questions about the individual strategies, I wondered if the best one would take a strategy at a time rather than hopping about from one to the other. So that's how I propose to do it. So we got any questions on the overall approach to the strategy, the general overview of them? Yes, Councillor Rawlins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. Very informative. Obviously, just looking at the general narrative, I'm looking at the Grantham one here, but it would apply to all the others. Obviously, it's the availability of funding to put these things forward. I mean, I'm assuming that these deliberations and reports would form the basis, if you like, of any funding requests should they be available, or certainly more detailed reports. But also you did say about the uncertainty, and as we can see over the last 2 or 3 years, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men are turned on their head in no time whatsoever. And we do have pressures, particularly on the East Coast, we're thinking about perhaps the use of hotels at the moment for non-tourist facilities. So how might that look to impact on what transport we needed in terms of those issues? No, very contentious one, but they're again not likely to be a short-term issue. We don't know how that's going to affect us. And also the power distribution on the East Coast and the works we were talking about just recently of upgrading that as well, which would have an effect on the offer we were going to put in terms of its attractiveness over certainly in the short term. And those are uncertainties. We just don't know how that's going to pan out.
Yeah, I think this is the thing with the strategy. You've got the highways and transport boards are going to have to work together to try and identify the funding streams for what they want to do. And I think that's why it's so important that we have these highways and transport strategy boards to meeting regularly so that things do get progressed and funding gets chased. But I'll hand over to Carl and Steve. I was trying to do my best with answering that.
I think you covered it, Chairman, to be honest. But yeah, the boards are very important. That's what we're using as sort of like the management of the strategies. And I think the key point about the funding is that it's chicken and egg. You need the strategies and a sort of an outline plan of what you want to do over a certain period of time, and that puts you in a stronger position to go to DFT or wherever and start actually asking for money or bid money, or for things like for EV, for instance. Even the Levelling Up Fund schemes effectively have come through a strategy. Another key aspect is that these things aren't fixed either. So the uncertainty in the last couple of years, just to do with inflation and things like that, we've got to be, sort of actively mobile in these strategies. So they are going to be reviewed every 5 years, and like I say, we can change and move things around and change the priority of things depending on what happens in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, I'll move on to the strategy by strategy now. Does anyone want to Tom? Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Sorry. Just picking up on one or two bits on the Skegness and Mablethorpe. I notice you mention at page 256 the Skegness Gateway and Western Relief Road. Is it intended that that Western Relief Road part might be picked up as part of the Gateway works? I'm appreciating that if Gateway happens, then there will need to be a junction of some kind, and it feels to make sense to do one junction and do it well and do it once, rather than getting into having to find alternative routes, alternative junctions, which only increases the cost. I mean, I really welcome the fact that Western Relief Road is featured in this transport strategy, appreciating that anyone on that north and northeast side, southeast side, sorry, of Skegness, trying to get across the 158, trying to get to the main road to Borough Le Marsh and onward to Spilsby, Horncastle, Lincoln and elsewhere, currently has to either go into Skegness and to pick up Lincoln Road or Borough Road and come out again, or you've got to go on the rat run, which you're mentioning at page 281. We want these to not to be rat runs, quite rightly. We want them to be quiet lanes and respect the type of road which they are. So do we have a estimated time frame for delivering Western Relief Road, and are we intending to correlate our efforts on this with the Gateway efforts? I'm pleased on page 271 that we're mentioning mobility hubs in respect to Skegness, but could you, unless I've missed something, are we looking at mobility hubs in terms of Mablethorpe, as I think we should be aware that through the Town Fund project, one of those identified is specifically a mobility hub for Mablethorpe, and I'm aware that there is funding allocated to begin some of that process. And just one, yes, and in terms of rail at Skegness and encouraging people onto rail for their holidays, the biggest improvement in terms of service for Skegness would be a connection, if only a tourist summer Saturdays connection to Peterborough in the same way as there currently exists from Derby and Nottingham. Appreciating that at the moment, if you live in Peterborough or that part of the world, you can't really get to a seaside resort very easily by train. You can go from Peterborough, change at Norwich, and out to Cromer or Yarmouth, but that's a very long journey with a change. And I think there is genuinely an opportunity in terms of Skegness for effectively tapping that new market and a new rail market for people to be able to get on a train and go to Skegness from Peterborough, where you can't at the moment, and or obviously at the moment you're probably getting in a car. So that's where I feel there being an advantage there. Just picking up back on Sleaford, again in respect of rail on page 218, do we have any idea of how successful dialogue is going on securing a Sunday service on that line? Appreciating that if you live in Sleaford and you want to nip to either Peterborough or to Lincoln on a Sunday, you can't without driving. Appreciating too that the railway line through Sleaford has been specifically upgraded at vast expense for freight to run. All the signalling now is done remotely. All of the level crossings are automatic barriers, so there isn't the same impediment as what there used to be to running more frequent services on that line. The old argument used to be the cost of staffing the signal boxes and the crossings and everything else, which is no longer the case. So it should be a straightforward thing for rail operating companies, train operating companies to introduce, and I'd just be interested in how discussions have gone in respect of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ashton. I was going to move on to the individual strategies. I thought your question was coming as a general question, so I was thinking we're starting with the Skegness and Mablethorpe transport strategies now. I think a lot of the things that you're bringing up, the sort of stuff that will be progressed through the transport strategy boards, that's what they're there for. So I think a lot of those points that you make, it will be have yet to be sort of addressed really thoroughly. But I'll hand over back to Carl. Sam is asking to come in here.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Ashton. I'll just quickly cover on the proposed Western bypass, and then I will hand over to Steve with glee. So the Western Relief Road, just to be aware, so we're going through a feasibility at the moment, so that's actually been funded through the Lincolnshire Coastal Highway process, the pinch point that came out as part of the Conservative Manifesto, so that's being progressed as we speak. That feasibility is due to be complete early next year, which will then give us an indication of what the options are, where it may go, where it may connect, but the clear things, it's about linking your north-south route and also linking the 158 that comes into it to both the north and the south, so removing the need to if you don't want to go through the centre of Skegness. We'll have a better understanding when that's complete, and we'll be looking at things like benefit to cost ratios, which is an absolute key thing when you're looking at business cases. Without those kind of volumes, you're unlikely to be successful with any form of third-party funding, and for a scheme of this scale and this value, we're talking well over 100 million, I would imagine, but I don't know until the actual feasibility is complete. Just to stress before I hand over, just as Carl and Steve have gone through those potential projects, what we should highlight is that all of these transport strategies have gone through the individual transport boards. That we've worked through it, which has got representatives, members and officers from both the county council, the district council. As part of the engagement, we've gone through stakeholders, key parties. So this isn't the authority going away and doing something by themselves. This is a collection of people that have been reviewed as it's brought forward. And as Stephen Carr highlighted, they will be continuously reviewed by that board. Now, if any scheme comes out of that and wants to be progressed, that will go through its own governance process, come back to this committee as an individual scheme and a key decision if necessary. But just to be clear, this is almost the start of this is setting the strategy, the concept of what could be done, but it's not set in stone. And also, just to highlight, is that actually capital investment, so investment into the road, whether that's a junction improvement, I should highlight, as you'll see in the document, is relatively low down on the intervention. We should be looking at things like electrification, digitalisation, land use, mobility, of influencing rail networks, things like that will have greater impact from a highway network perspective, rather than purely investment into the capital roadworks. Not saying that those aren't important. I just thought I'd clear that up and then hand over to Steve.
Thank you, Sam, for that. And it's quite right to sort of highlight the importance of the Transport Strategy Boards and their part in this, and the makeup is from, partners, district councils, county council, everybody is involved in progressing these strategies. Over to you, Carl, then, or Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Ashton, thank you for your comments, questions. I picked up on a couple of points outside of what Sam has just responded to. The mobility hubs and the Towns Fund. Yes, I believe the Mablethorpe one is actually actively being pursued, and ELDC are actually leading on that. So to the best of my knowledge, it's the Victoria Road Grayscroft bus station, which is where that's going to land. Skegness, if we've used the term mobility hub, then actually I think that probably is slightly misleading, because it's more integrated public transport rather than mobility hub necessarily. Apologies that has misled, and I'll look to get that reworded on page 211 of our report. The second point, if I may, I'll generalise the two rail issues. You mentioned Skegness-Peterborough link, and you mentioned Sleaford Sunday service. A former colleague of ours moved on, who's developing LTP5, or developed LTP5. Jason Copper, he was responsible for dealing with Network Rail and that interface between LCC and Network Rail. Brings it to the boards that we sit on a quarterly basis, and those are talked about and reviewed and discussed, and a steer given at those board meetings. I don't actually know who's picking up from Jason since he's departed the authority, but he will have a substitute that will come to those board meetings, and we'll pick these two issues up and hopefully look to progress them. Apologies if I missed anything else.
No. Thank you, Steve, for that. Do you want to come back quickly, Tom?
Thank you, if I could. I was just going to come back on Skegness Western Relief Road. I'd be alarmed. I don't know. I'd be alarmed if costs have got for that sort of scheme up, even with inflation, up to £100 million. I mean, looking as I am at the map of those two roads, they sort of widen out the further out you get. I mean, at the current sort of narrower point, we're talking about a mile across relatively flat land with a couple of relatively small drainage board drains to go across. It's not on the scale, obviously, of a Lincoln bypass or anything such as that. But my challenge is that there is a scheme at the moment coming forward that's referenced in here, Skegness Gateway, that is going to require some kind of junction, and it is going to obviously extend the built bit of Skegness further out. The further this, the further out we have to go for any Western Relief Road, the longer it will have to be. The more obstacles in the way, the more expensive it becomes. Not least, as the point I was making, if there has to be a junction of some kind to access Skegness Gateway, then maybe there is an opportunity on the back of that to do one junction and do it well to serve both purposes, even if that funding for the road on its eventual route isn't there yet.
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Ashton. I think we need to get it clear that We're here to okay the strategies and not go into the detail. And what you're doing is going into the detail of what's in the strategies. We're not here to carry out the strategies today. We're here to say, yes, that's the stuff that needs looking at. It's in the strategy. That is for the Transport Strategy Boards to deal with and move forward. You're indicating, Sam.
No, only to say that we're going into, as similar to yourself, Chairman, into some detail. I'm happy to take that offline, Councillor Ashton.
Okay, thanks. Moving on then. Have we? Yes, Councillor Dyer. What I was going to say, is there any more on Skegness and Mablethorpe, please?
Well, in that case, I'm a little bit lost, Chairman. I've got something to say, but not on Skegness and Mablethorpe. But
what I was trying to do is take the strategies one at a time. I was going to go down them, Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Mablethorpe. Councillor Ashton indicated speak when we were doing the general, and I handed over to him, but I let him carry on Skegness and Mablethorpe and thought, well, we'll deal with that one first and then we'll go to the others. So that's where we are, and I'm sorry for any confusion caused, but that's where. So have you got a question on or a comment on Skegness and Mablethorpe? No. Right. Now, I was going to move on to the Grantham strategy now, which was at the top of the list. So has anybody got any comments on Grantham? Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I've got a few points to raise, and I do suspect that they're going to be in all of them as well. But specifically on the Grantham one, on page 124, there's references to Doncaster Airport, which has now closed. So there is obviously, well, it's looking hopeful that it may reopen, but obviously that's not correct. So at this point, depending on when this is due to be published, that probably needs to be amended to reflect that fact at this stage. The other points that I just want to make are regarding sort of general points, as I say, that I suspect are in all, but I paid sort of more attention to the Grantham one, not that I paid less attention to the others, but went through that one sort of line by line. Journey reliability, page 127, absolutely paramount. People will know that I've spoken about this before. People will not use journeys if they are not reliable, so I'm delighted to see that that's mentioned in the strategy. The promotion of the bikeability schemes in schools, I think, as part of the behavioural change package is fundamental. It needs to start from a young age, and if you can get sort of children using bikes and sort of promoting the bikeability at that stage, that will translate into adulthood. Call Connect, I am a massive, massive supporter of the Call Connect scheme. As you know, sort of, it's absolutely invaluable in my division, and I think that the more that that can be used and sort of rolled out across the scheme, then fantastic. So I think that's brilliant that that's in there as well. And the last thing I want to mention, and this again may be a bit too specific for this occasion, but nonetheless I shall go into it. The taxi licensing policy on page 146, we talk about introducing a scheme, excuse me 1 second, I've just written taxi licensing policy, but broadly relating to low emission vehicles. I think sort of that has to be introduced with fair warning for existing taxi licensing operators. So we must be mindful when doing that it's not a sort of in 6 months' time that's going to be it. I don't think that would be fair to anybody who holds an existing licence. And as I say, I suspect all of those points will be mentioned across all three transport schemes, but for myself, I have focused on the Grantham aspect. So those are my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Carl, Steve?
I think I was just going to say I'm glad that I've captured them all, really. I think the taxi licensing policy, again, that's something, it's within the strategy, and it was something that will be taken up through the board and the various stakeholder groups to make sure when it is implemented, or if implemented, that it's, you know, it's done appropriately.
Thank you. Right, any more questions or comments on the Grantham strategy? Yes, Councillor Dyer.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. Well, with all three of these reports, but on Grantham, the thing is with strategic reports is that when a member of the public looks at this, and they ask the question, what does this mean for me in the next 5, 10, 15 years? It's really hard to see that. And I get that that's because it's a strategy and we're looking long term. But as politicians trying to sell that to our residents, you know, some of these lines in here, it's very difficult really to see how people are going to benefit from it. Just, you know, your average man and woman who live in wherever the report is. Just before I forget, on page 130 of our agenda pack, 28 of the report, there's a typo in the final point. It says to be made car. There's a little typo there. But my problem with reading these reports is that because there's so much there, I probably use the word fluff, to be honest with you, but we're in a public meeting, so I won't use the word fluff, but I've already said it. Because there's so much fluff in the report, a lot of this is at odds with each other. So at one stage in the Grantham report, we're talking about sustainable ways for residents within Grantham to get about Grantham and to travel to the train station or wherever. But then further down the report, where we're talking about parking tariffs, you know, making them cheaper at the train station, that's only going to encourage people to drive to the train station, isn't it? So my issue really is that it's just at odds with each other. But just some specific questions, Chairman, if I may, on the report, and just for detail, really. Page 144, you refer to electric scooter scheme. I assume that's the sort of scheme that's being trialled now in Nottingham that's causing havoc with electric scooters all over the pavements. And you see them in Lincoln, people racing down Tritton Road. And I personally think they're an awful contraption, and I wouldn't like to see them rolled out. So what public consultation has been done in Grantham to conclude that the people of Grantham want an electric scooter scheme by 2036? And then also within the report, page 143, there is a mention of speed humps. Now, my understanding is that LCC don't actively go out and look at installing speed humps. Am I wrong? Is that something that we're going to be looking at in the next few years? Just question, because that was news to me. And one final point, Chairman, and it's only so I can shut up and go away. But within the Sleaford report, you mentioned something called quiet lanes. Quiet lanes, a quiet lane strategy, which essentially it's quiet country lanes where there's you know, where often, you know, motorists can get away with virtually anything because apart from the poor condition of the road, there's no one there to catch them. And it's to encourage people to use these roads to walk and cycle along them, but by having soft measures in place, i.e. signs on quiet roads. I mean, I think that's quite frankly ridiculous. These quiet rural roads where you know, you can't police things anyway, having a sign that says slow down isn't going to do much good. If you want people to use quiet lanes, they're going to have footpaths, aren't they? So people can feel safe off of the road or take traffic off them completely. I just think there's some wishful thinking in this report with some of the strategies that probably will result in nothing. And as a politician trying to sell that to the public, you know, in 15 years' time, you're going to have a quiet lane around the corner. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. So can we try and bring this back down to earth a little bit and perhaps have some more realistic aims and ambitions? Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks.
Oh, one more, sorry, one more. Steve, within your report, you mentioned the trial of Terrace Street electric vehicle charge points. I'm sure the whole committee would be really excited to have more detail on that, if you could, or after this meeting, or whatever. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Dyer. Well, you're safe on the quiet lanes because it's in all of them, I think. It's in the Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness and Maylethorpe. So anyway, I'll hand over to, I'm not sure who's taking this, Carl or Steve.
I think it might be a bit of both, to be honest. I'll focus on the electric scooters. Yes, they are in the sharing package I think they've got as an option. It's not a definite, there's been no consultation on the use of them. Speaking with Phil Watt, who you probably all know, is sort of actively involved in the Active Travel Fund and bids, and he keeps abreast of what the sort of flavour of things that are happening in that sort of aspect of active travel. And as you understand it already, there are trials of electric scooters, and there's been no decision making about the legalising them yet on what they're allowed to use, but we've got it as an option. So if it turns out that we can't use them anywhere, then they'll be taken out. But also, if they are used and they become a legal right to use that vehicle, then we can't legislate them out of existence, unfortunately, so we might have to accommodate them. So it's more of a case of wait and see and see what happens with that, basically. Speed humps, I think the speed humps thing, that's an error, that should be taken out. What would be more looking at is more like traffic calming or traffic sensitive streets. So that would be more like horizontal type measures rather than humps, because like you say, they're a nightmare, not just for normal vehicles, but for buses and ambulances and stuff like that. So I can look into that and get those removed from the strategy. Steve?
Thanks, Carl. Councillor Dyer, thank you for your comments. The quiet lane strategy is a relatively new concept. Fully take your point, actually signs probably won't be enough. We're learning at the moment, we'll learn from others as well. As and when we ever get around to doing these sort of things, hopefully we'll know an awful lot more about what would and wouldn't work, what they'll cost, how it can be managed, how it can be policed, etc., etc. But I think at this moment in time, perhaps the best answer I can give to you is it's still very early days as a concept. Trial for EV charging points on terrace streets. I think what I'll do is try and find the contact who's dealing with that county-wide outside this meeting and put them in touch with you directly, so you can talk to them and ask questions about how it will work from a practicality perspective for on-street charging, and I'll do that for you as soon as I can outside this meeting.
Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Sorry, Chairman, can I just pick up one thing? Sorry, Councillor, because I think the thrust of what your sort of things is about this document perception against the reality of delivery and things like that. And just to be clear, that this document is incredibly difficult because we're trying to set a strategy of what we may do over the future years, and we'd love to go and specifically say we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But without the funding, you can't specify you're doing that. But without having the document, it's almost impossible to get any form of third-party funding, certainly central government funding. So it's trying to find that balance between, and there will always be detailed elements that we can look at and think, well, maybe it should have been written like this and that. But it's about what the thrust of the document is trying to do, which is to set the vision and the ambitions. And these are, as we said at the start, these are concepts, these are provisions, these are thoughts. And I must stress a lot of these thoughts are from members of the public through the engagement process, went through the stakeholders, through sort of some professional views about what we can look at, but none of these will take place without the approval of the board, which represents the people, the local communities, the local members that sit on those boards, and eventually will come through as part of this process and the governance process to bring forward. But I sympathise with what you're saying, that it's actually very difficult as a member to say this will or won't definitely happen. And it's that chicken and egg scenario about having it linking back through to the LTP.
Yes, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one follow-on from that. So just from what you've said there, Carl, electric scooters are currently illegal to use on the highway, but we're going to put this illegal mode of transport within our transport strategy on the basis that it might become legal in the future. I mean, I could reel off a list of other illegal forms of transport that people might want to do on the highway. Surely it makes sense to keep illegal forms of transport off a report until it is illegal, because actually from a national point of view, e-scooters are quite controversial, I think, and I wouldn't want to see them rolled out. So I think what we're doing as a council, by including e-scooters in this report, we're normalising something that is currently illegal. So I'm quite concerned that we're including an illegal mode of transport within our transport strategy. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not just our strategy, though. It's not just our strategy. It's the district council strategy, and partners. So it's everybody's strategy there. Yeah.
I think the easiest thing to do is take it out of the strategies, because they're reviewed every 5 years anyway. So if it changes and they do become normalised or whatever, then we can actively put them back in at some stage in the future.
Okay. So they're going to get taken out where they are in the strategies at the moment. Right. I've got Councillor Vernon has asked to come back. Is it on Grantham?
Yes, but it
Yeah.
is actually specifically relating to Councillor Dyer's points on the quiet lane. So you will be aware, I live down in the southern area of the region in Lincolnshire, and I am aware of at least 2 that Peterborough City Council or Cambridgeshire County Council, I'm fairly sure it comes under Peterborough City Council, have with the quiet lanes. And they do actually work really well. So they're quiet lanes. You expect horses, cyclists, children scooting, not electric scooters, just normal push-along scooters. But yeah, so it may be sort of having a conversation with them, may be able to assist as well. But I can speak for them and say that they have controlled traffic down there quite well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more comments on Grantham, the Grantham strategy? Councillor Austin, is it on the Grantham strategy?
It was a general one, actually.
Well, we'll
about
come to
quiet,
that later.
About quiet lanes, though.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a quiet lane and a rural rat run?
Someone who wants to answer that question? No one. Councillor Vernon is...
I would actually say
happy
that's
to-
sort of fundamental to that, because actually the one in particular question that I'm referring to is awareness. And actually it is signage and awareness, but that would be my layman's view of that.
Thank you. Right. Any more questions on the Grantham, Grantham's transport strategy? Yeah. No? Oh, I'm going to go to Councillor Richard Wright now, who was first to put his hand up. I expected to call him first until the Councillor Ashton put his hand up. Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chairman. I've sat here waiting to be quite positive about transport strategies, my heart's sinking. And I would just, before I just that, I would just like to ask Councillor Austin, when you're talking about rat runs, is from somebody who professed to turning off and driving through Ruskington instead of using Oldingham roundabout, then I think we ought to stay off that subject. And Steve, if I could just pick you up, please, on sustainable urban extensions being development sites. They are quite a bit more substantial than that, in that they're well thought through strategies of areas that are subservient to the towns they serve, with design codes, infrastructure delivery, and years of design behind them. So they're not just developments. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, you know, it's been mentioned about the transport boards. I'd just like to pay tribute to that system because, you know, although, as I won't repeat what Sam said about all the consultation that's gone into these strategies, but the boards are instrumental in funding these, informing these, sorry, not funding. And in fact, you know, I find them very useful. I used to think quite often that highways officers were mythical beings till I actually started going to the board meetings, and the fact that we can talk about operational and strategic all at the same time is really, really useful, and a lot of what you see in these documents has come from that. With regards to the Sleaford one specifically, then I think it's a really good piece of work. The part of the answer to Councillor Dyer's question about where we reading this and what do you think would happen is I think that these should be published far and wide, because where there are some ideas in there, some possibilities, then some of those actually can already be aided now, that if there was a change in behaviour, so where we've got junction issues, things like if people actually realise the effect they're having. I was talking to somebody the other day with regards, they were talking about the when they went into Sleaford, the problems they had. And this is not generalised about retired people, for anyone says anything, but I said, you're retired, why the hell do you go in at that time every day when you could just wait and go in at a different time when it's not so busy? You know, and they said, oh, good point, I've just been doing that for 20 years. But that adds into our strategy that we would see a potential congestion at a junction that we're trying to design out, when the reality is there's just a chance if people read this and saw what we're trying to do that they might already be having an effect on it which could change it. The ideas that are within it, especially with regards to active travel, again, you know, it's looked at everything, and of course it's called Sleaford, but it's the hinterland as well, which includes my village, you know, and the fact is I've seen the increase in cycling and walking into Sleaford over the years, and if we can do anything at all which is planned with regards to the cycle path out to that would be fantastic, because it would encourage people in. And even electric scooters. Now, I'm afraid I'm going to make Councillor Dyer look like the grumpy old man here instead of me, because I've used these electric scooters legally in other places where they are legal. I've only been accused of causing havoc by my partner, but nobody else. And the fact is they can be allowed in there because they're part of a national trial scheme. And I can't remember which two cities it is, but two of them have just been extended to 2024 to allow for the results to come through, because they're here, they are used. Whether they're legal or not is a moot point. But the fact is, if we all remember, segways were going to change the way of the world. Now, segways are only ever used by tourists in few and far between places, whereas electric scooters have actually materialised, and if they're used properly and allowed for, well, I've used them, especially in holiday destinations. You know, it's better than getting a taxi. I don't drink when I'm using them, but you've got to watch what you're doing, you know. But I think there is a place for them, but it's got to be managed, and we can't just demonise them because they're being used illegally at the moment. So I would like to see them in there, because the legality comes from the fact that it's a national trial at the moment in several places, and I don't think we should say just because they're illegal now that we don't include them, because, you know, that's the only way things become legalised, by trying them. So overall, I think it's a real positive. Yes, we're talking about the fact that we've got strategies that aren't funded, but as we've heard, it's chicken and egg. And we've got to try. We don't just give up and say, well, there's no funding, so we'll just, or these are difficult, so we'll not bother, or it's always the same, so we'll not talk about it, because that's what the strategy is designed to get past. And I think it's really important, and the strategies recognise the importance of place. They see that transport is a major influence on how our towns and our villages are used, how they thrive, how they change, what are they there for, which is, you know, absolutely brilliant. The only thing that I would pick up on the Sleaford one, which does need addressing, is on page 222 with regards to dualling of the A17. I think there's a typo, because it said that the single carriageway portions of the A17 have 29 road traffic accidents. 6 have been fatal, 14 have been serious, and 35 have been slight, which adds up to 55. And seeing as it says the KSI rate is 36%, that's the only way that number is legitimate. So I think the 29 wants changing before it goes on in wider circulation, Chairman. But otherwise, I actually welcome these strategies, because, as I say, if we're not inspirational, if we don't try, we're never going to get anywhere, and we need something to back that up. And even if only a portion of this actually comes into effect, then that's better than doing nothing.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. On the point about the e-scooters, I mean, Carl did say that these are reviewed every 5 years, so it's either coming up with a suitable wording if they're on trial in certain places prior to becoming legal, or saying that take them out, and when these are reviewed in 5 years' time, they can be put back in if they're deemed to be legal by then. And I think that's probably the way to go, as suggested. Yep. But take your point. No, we haven't anyone else indicated to speak. I've just got one thing. On the programming the strategy and then monitoring the strategy, it says, on programming the strategy, it says timescales have been set for the various interventions, ranging from short, medium and long-term delivery. And then it says later on, the Transport Strategy Board will be responsible for the continual monitoring and reviewing of the interventions. But my understanding, I did speak to Carl and Steve about this before me, is that the Transport Strategy Board set whether it's a short, medium or long-term aim. And so if you read in this strategy document at the moment, what I was doing, I was looking for somewhere to see whether there was somewhere where it said this is short-term, medium-term or long-term. So I think that needs clearing up in some way. Quite either making the statement that the Transport Strategy Boards will decide on short, medium and long term, and then that they will then be responsible for monitoring that going forward, that form of words.
Yeah, I agree, Chairman. So we'll reword that paragraph within the programme. Okay.
And I think it's similar in all of them. Yeah. Thank you. Right, moving forward then on to the proposal. I'm going to move that the committee approves the 3 area transport strategies and plans contained within each, and that our comments from today's discussion are recorded as feedback and taken under consideration. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Wright, who's first with his hand up. Okay, would all those in favour please raise your hand? It looks unanimous to me, so I won't bother to ask the other questions. Thank you. It is unanimous. So moving on then to item 10 on the agenda, the committee work programme. And I'll hand over to Chiara to take that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This item enables the committee to consider and comment on the content of its own work programme for the coming year, as to ensure that scrutiny activities focus where it can be of greatest benefit. This work programme is being reviewed at each and every single meeting of this committee to ensure that contents are still relevant and will continue adding value to the work of the Council and partners. In relation to our next meeting, which is now scheduled for the 23rd of January 2023, we are going to be taking items revenue and capital budget proposals for 2023-2024, which is a pre-decision item, with executive decision on the 7th of February 2023 and council on the 17th of February 2023. We will also be receiving a report on civil parking enforcement, and that is the annual report for 2021-2022. We will be receiving a report on route and place-based transport strategies, and that is also an annual report. We shall receive the winter maintenance interim report as previously requested by members of this committee, and also the highways gully cleansing, repair and surface water flooding update. Also to add that and to confirm that on the meeting scheduled for the 24th of April 2023, in addition to the 2 items already listed, we shall receive the street work and permitting report. And there's no other updates to the work plan. If there's any more items or topics that you would like to see listed in future months, please do raise this point straight away, or feel free to email me following this meeting. Thank you very much.
Well, I just got a quick one and then I'll come over to Councillor Clark. On the items to be programmed, we've got Anglian Waters, road and maintenance works and traffic disruption. That needs to be included in the street works and permitting. So I think we can say that that is coming up into the April programme as well under the same item, and that obviously we'll be focusing on Anglian Water quite a bit on that paper. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Following the full council meeting on Friday, a motion was passed relating to parking on pavements. I think this item should come here, and the highways should say what their position is in the enforcement, but at the same time, and more to the point, I think we should have the police here to say what their policy is, because every time I speak to an officer, you get a different version.
Yeah, well, we can have a report on pavement parking. Indeed, we have previously. I think it was a few years ago. The other thing that comes to mind, we've got this traffic management task and finish group, this special scrutiny committee, and we're doing the work on what's looked at under that, and it might be that we'd put something in that recommendation, a review, that they have a look at that and see what we might be able to do as a council within that policy.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but where I'm coming from is the highways are doing, like I said on full council, what they can, and, but where it falls short is what the police are doing and what they're not doing. So that element wants to come in somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. That is a problem, because I sit at parish council meetings and I say, well, that's a police issue. Complaints about parking on the pavement, and it is, but it's a job to get them to do anything about it. Yeah, because of their workload. So if we have a paper like that, we would need the police to be present. So
happy to liaise with the Assistant Director for Public Protection, who is also our representative across the 2 bodies, so to see if we can arrange that. Thank you for your input.
Thank you. We're going to have a look at that, Councillor Clark. Any other comments? Right. I'll declare the meeting closed then. Thanks for your attendance this morning, and we've got finished in a reasonable time. Thank you.